Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of No Such Thing as a Brera Quadrifoglio, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. We're coming to you from 5 undisclosed locations around the UK, although mostly in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and I'm sitting here with Kirsty Hodson, David Faithful, John Griffiths and Nick Wright, and we've gathered around the microphones with our 5 favourite facts from the world of Alfa Romeo in the UK. And in no particular order, here we go. Starting with my fact. My fact this month is that Alfa Romeo hasn't always had a subsidiary in the UK. 6 companies, or maybe 7 or 5, have represented Alfa Romeo in the UK.
How can we not know?
Well, this was before corporate lawyers were invented, and the arrangements to import cars were often fluid and informal and based on personal relationships. You may remember the story we ran on the first Alfa to race in the UK from episode 107 of the podcast and the October 2024 issue of the magazine.
Is that George Vidler or Vidler?
Vidler, that's right. So Vidler worked for Dirac, and Dirac Italia morphed into Alfa in 1910. But Vidler then moved to Rolls-Royce, and we talked about his career at Rolls-Royce in the UK and Australia in the podcast. But what I didn't realise until I heard this fact from long-time club member David Gibbons was that Rolls-Royce was probably Alfa's first concessionaire in the UK.
Probably.
Yeah, it's the first company we have any actual evidence for, but it's possible the reason Vidler had that Alfa 24 HP that he raced at Aston is that he, through Dirac, had acquired it for a customer, and entirely plausible that it was he who took the relationship to Rolls-Royce.
Seems an odd tie-up, Rolls-Royce and Alfa. I think of Alfa as a driver's car and a Rolls as a car with a driver.
Yeah, there was probably less of a difference in the 20s, to be fair. Rolls-Royce competed in some reliability trials, but they eventually bought Bentley to keep its sportier customers happy. Who knows? Maybe if Bentley hadn't been so badly battered by the Great Depression and Mussolini hadn't come to power in Italy, maybe Alfa would have ended up as Rolls' sporting brand.
Well, the other link I found is that at some point in the 20s, Thompson and Taylor took over as the Alfa importer from the rather brilliantly named F.W. Styles Alfa Romeo British Sales Limited. Alfa seemed to go through concessionaires in the 20s and 30s like they went through dealers in the 2010s. Thompson and Taylor sold Alfas from their premises at Booklands. In those same workshops, they also built Malcolm Campbell's Bluebird Land Speed record cars, the last of which was indeed powered by a Rolls-Royce RV12 engine.
There's another link with Campbell too. According to an article in the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs magazine, Campbell was a chief inspector in the Special Constabulary of Reigate Borough Police Force in Surrey. He put together a mobile section, divided into 2 classes.
Yeah, I saw that. First reserve was for super fast cars, and second reserve was moderately fast cars.
That's right. The squad was called the Bluebirds and included Mercedes, Bentley, Sunbeams, Rolls-Royces and an Alfa Romeo.
Sounds like a TOS vigilante force.
It does. The cool bit, though, is that the Alfa was Campbell's own car, and the first car Campbell labelled Bluebird was a 1906 Dirac.
And the other really interesting post-war importer was Ramponi Rockall. They were a little mews in Lancaster Mews in London, weren't they? Certainly into the 1980s. They were, but the business goes back right to the 1930s.
Wasn't Ramponi an Alfa mechanic before he came to England?
Well, he certainly was. He was taken on as Giuseppe Campari's riding mechanic at the age of 17 and then joined Alfa Romeo as an apprentice. He was actually Antonio Ascari's riding mechanic when the pair won the Belgian Grand Prix back in 1925 in a P2.
Wasn't that about the time they banned riding mechanics?
It was, yeah, and later that same season. And the ban probably saved Ramponi's life. Ascari was killed in the French Grand Prix that year and Ramponi would have been in the car with him. He then became chief test driver for the Sixi under Vittorio Giano and returned to racing as a co-driver, effectively a navigator and riding mechanic with his old mentor Campari. And got 2 of Alfa's Mille Miglia wins. That's right, in 1928 and 29.
So how did he end up in England?
Well, we can probably thank Mussolini for that, because according to online Italian car magazine Veloce today, he was an independent thinker and left Scuderia Ferrari, having moved over with the rest of the racing team because, and I quote, he may have offended the fascists.
Well, it was easily done, I think. He came here and worked for a wealthy American racer and was then Dick Siemens' mechanic building a Delage that dominated voiturette racing around 1936. Then he and a Formula Bentley mechanic called Billy Rockall started their eponymous empire by converting a Maserati racer for road use back in that shop in Lancaster Mews.
And there was a bit of a hiccup before they became the Alfa concessionaire, though. Ramponi was interred on the Isle of Man.
You're inferring that he was interred.
I'm inferring that he was interred, and he was indeed interred on the Isle of Man for most of the duration of the war. despite now being a British citizen and his anti-fascist history.
There was a lot of that. Alfonso Conti, the father of Tom Conti, the Scottish actor, was also imprisoned, as was his godfather, Gaetano Cibelli. Cibelli was taken for interrogation, and the officer in charge said, "We know that you have 2 sons." "Yes, that's right," he said. "We found one. You must tell us where the other is." "Immediately," barked the officer. "Of course, I tell you. He's in the Royal Air Force."
That's brilliant. Ramponi was released in 1944 and worked briefly for Bristol Siddeley before he re-established the company and used his connections with Alfa Romeo to build the business. And the contacts he'd made with British manufacturers like Ferodo and Girling to act as a liaison with Alfa in Italy.
Okay, I think that's it. Time for fact number 2, and that's Nick's fact.
Yes, it's another Rolls-Royce link. In the last 2 episodes of No Such Thing as a Brera Quadrifoglio, we talked about the Bristol aero engines that Alfa built under licence, including the Pegasus radial engine from the Royal Navy Swordfish. Bristol reused the Pegasus name for the engine it developed for the Harrier, which later became a Rolls-Royce. But that Bristol Rolls-Royce link didn't end there. There was a failed project to put Alfa engines in Bristol cars, which we covered in the magazine in February 2019. But Alfa Romeo also used to service Rolls-Royce engined Alitalia jets at one point.
Whatever happened to Alitalia?
It was privatised and then went bust. The Italian government bought everything back for a knockdown price and relaunched it as ITA Airways.
I don't think it was just Alitalia, though. I think it might have done the same for the Norwegians.
I think that's right. Alitalia was its biggest customer, though, and the partnership was even featured on Alitalia adverts. Alitalia's work team, Alfa Romeo, Pratt & Whitney, and Rolls-Royce. There were 2 parts to the business. The services business looked after the Rolls-Royce Conway engines on the Boeing 707, Douglas DC-8, and the Dart turboprops used on the Little Fokkers.
Sorry?
F-27s, I think they were. The other part of the business was the one we talked about before, which built engines under licence, and engines of its own design. There was a joint venture between Alfa Romeo, MTU of Germany, and Rolls-Royce, based out of Leavesden in Hertfordshire, called the European Light Engine Collaboration, which led to the Rolls-Royce RB318 and Alfa Romeo AR318 engines. During the project, there was a team of Alfa Romeo engineers based in Hertfordshire.
The big team?
This is another fact that came from Mr. Gibbo, one that we know about for sure. Who says there's no I in team?
You mentioned that Alfa licensed the Bristol Jupiter and Bristol Pegasus designs. They did a lot more than just manufacture them under license. They re-engineered them to use metric measurements and took the development in a different direction completely to the one that Bristol took. And do you know which engineer was responsible for that development work?
Not off the top of my head.
Friend of the podcast, Vittorio Giano, while he was working on the P2, 6C and 8C cars.
Impressive.
Stop the podcast.
Stop the podcast.
What's a foot?
Well, it's the appendage on the end of your leg that stops you falling over, but that's not important right now.
Surely you can't be serious.
You've got carried away with the airplane links, and stop calling me Shirley.
Why did we stop?
Talk about today's sponsor, the Arrock Club Shop.
Isn't that just for toys?
I think you're thinking of Argos.
You could be right. Still, I knew something was afoot. Have they started selling socks?
Probably the only part of the body they can't cover, actually. Hats, jackets, polos, T-shirts.
Trousers?
Okay, well, the top half's well covered. From body warmers.
Gilets?
Oh, bless you. Jackets, hoodies, and some really nice Fair Isle bobble hats.
It's not just clothes either. There's a range of Christmas gift ideas from mugs to umbrellas.
Exactly. And there's still plenty of time to order before Christmas.
How long?
Well, you can order up to the 19th of December for first class delivery and up to the 22nd for special delivery next day.
But don't leave it to the last minute. You'll need to leave some time to wrap up.
And I think wrapping up is exactly what we should be doing now.
Okay, on with the show.
On with the podcast.
Right, it's time for fact number 3, and that is Kirsty's fact.
There was a YouTube video of Valtteri Bottas driving his new 33 Stradale around Monaco. And I wondered whether any other big British celebrities had owned Alfas. Obviously, there are other motoring celebrities. Jeremy Clarkson has a GTV6.
Gordon Murray has an Alfaholics Junior Zagato.
Exactly, but I was looking for ordinary celebrities.
Ordinary celebrities?
You know what I mean. Anyway, Bob Geldof of Boomtown Rats and Live Aid had a V6 916 Spider.
He's Irish?
Yeah, he's Sir Bob. I think we can count him.
Well, there are some press shots kicking around of Bob Geldof leaning on the car itself, shot by friend of the podcast and of the club, Michael Ward of Auto Italia.
He hasn't got it anymore, but Kevin McLeod used to have a 1900 and was quite active at his local section.
Yeah, I met him at a multi-section event at the Haynes Museum.
Gio Compario, Win Evans from the Go Compare ads, has, or certainly had, a 939 Spider.
All the best people do. Talking of spiders, Steve Coogan had a Julia Spider, which is far too cool for Alan Partridge. I assume he doesn't have it anymore because it's been up for sale with his name in the description in an attempt to bump up the price.
I also found that Rory Bremner had a 1963 Spider and a 166.
Some would say that's appropriate because the 166 is a Lancia doing an impression of an Alfa. To be fair, they threw away all the Kappas, McPherson struts in favour of double wishbones at the front and a multi-link rear end. And then GAC in China bought the tooling and used it to make the comical Trumpchi GA5, which did a barely recognisable impression of a car.
That's a bit unfair. It was hideous to look at, but the underpinnings were still sound, albeit over 20 years old by the time they eventually killed it off. The other celebrity is James Bond, of course. Okay, he didn't drive the 159, which obviously was way faster than an Aston Martin DBS V12, but had a strange propensity to fall off cliffs in Quantum of Solace, but lots of us did. It was a UK-only edition, that Quantum of Solace one. It was actually a 1.9 JTDM Lusso in black, of course, with some lovely 19-inch TI alloys. But he did drive a GTV6.
A stolen GTV6.
Correct, yeah, and he drove it like he stole it too. That was in that fantastic movie Octopussy, and they went through 3 of them in the filming, apparently. The full story of that is in the December issue of Alfa Romeo Driver, which should be with listeners shortly.
Unless you're catching up with listening to these podcasts in June, in which case the magazine will be halfway down the pile in the loo.
Yeah, so the best-selling modern Alfa was the 156, dating from, 1998 properly in the UK. But nobody knows the actual number of Giulietta models there were in the UK for sale. You'd got Sprint, Sprint Speciale, Veloce, Distinctive, Progression, Sport, Lusso, Exclusive, the Business Edition, Collezione, Quadrifoglio Verde, QV Line.
Launch edition. There was no limit to the number of limited editions, or with too many doors, of course.
In theory, you can find out how many through howmanyleft.com, or better still, the raw DVLA data. As an Alfister, you can lose hours trawling through that data, but ultimately it's all a bit pointless, because it's all down to how a car was registered at a DVLA office. I've seen Alfas recorded as buses. And before anyone writes in, I know Alfa did make buses, but I don't think any of them were Spiders. And there was a motorcycle.
Quite. On Giulietta's, they've got 81 types listed on How Many Left website. There was a max of around 28,000 on the road back in 2021, just as they were coming off sale. So an average of about 350 per edition, I reckon. The 156 shows a peak of nearly 42,000 back in 2005, again, just as they came off sale. But tragically, I couldn't believe this when I looked it up, but there are only just 787 road registered today, with about getting on for 3,000 on Sawn. But that's quite a shocking collapse. And it can't all be down to the cars with only half a floor painted.
It is sad. It was the 1998 European Car of the Year, beating the Volkswagen Golf and the Audi A6. And 40 of the 56 jury members put the 156 in first place.
I turned down a really good job once because they wouldn't let me have a 156 as a company car. 3 Series BMW or an Audi A4 were the only options. I haven't regretted it once. I ended up having 2 of them anyway, a saloon and a sport wagon.
Yeah, same for me. Only I had a sport wagon first. Absolutely loved the things.
Okay, it's time for our final fact of the show, and that is David.
Well, we know the Alfa Romeo Owners Club UK and Ireland is one of the oldest and largest Alfa Romeo owners clubs in the world. We have over 4,500 members, and there are other similar sized clubs around the world, with Australia, Netherlands and the USA all boasting towards 4,000 members. But the interesting fact is that there have been several years when the number of our UK club members exceeded Alfa Romeo's UK annual sales.
That's a little bit embarrassing.
Well, It's likely to be true this year, but given the current 75% growth rate, very unlikely to be next year.
And of course, our membership's the result of 115 years worth of annual sales, not just the one.
No, and if we can recruit a few of the junior owners coming to the brand for the first time, we might be able to keep it neck and neck, even with a 75% sales growth.
Sounds dangerously like a target.
It's not just quantity, of course. I was at the museum in Arasi a couple of weeks ago, and I met up with the wonderful Marco Fazio, who liaises with all the clubs around the world, and I asked him what else we could do for Alfa Romeo.
What did he say?
Nothing.
It's a bit rude. Not at all like Marco.
He said there's nothing more we can do. He said just to keep doing what we're doing and that we're perfect. I don't think any of us agrees with that, but it was really nice to hear.
I assume Marco is a member of the Registro Italiano Alfa Romeo, RIAR, the most significant and historically important Alfa Romeo owners club in Italy.
And fun fact, Registro Italiano are the only club to launch their own modern Alfa Romeo. And it was a Mito, naturally, in 2009. Only 46 editions of the car to celebrate their 46 years of age at the time. Possibly the rarest Mito out there.
And annoyingly, Registro Italiano was founded in 1962, which is only 2 years before our club.
That sort of record's so annoying. How do you beat something like that without inventing a time machine? Talking of time, that's all we have time for this week. If you'd like to get in contact with us about any of the things we've said over the course of this podcast, we can be found on email or through our social media accounts. My email address is in the magazine, and I'm at Alpha Driver UK on Instagram.
And I'm at Aroc_UK official on Twitter, X, Twix, whatever it is this week.
And I'm best as John.Griffiths at aroc-uk.com.
I'm on manager at aroc-uk.com.
Or you can go to our website. We've got all of our previous episodes up there, and links to our 2026 events will start to appear over the coming weeks.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye and have a happy Christmas.
And
Goodbye.
And
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody's gone. Before we started the podcast today, Nick made a joke about having some outtakes to add at the end, which amazingly we very rarely do. But here are a few bits that didn't go quite according to plan.
Collezione, Quadrifoglio Verdi, QV line.
Launch edition. There was no limit to the number of limited editions. All with too many... Oh, sorry, David, I've just taken your line.
That's all right. I was just getting myself prepped and then you jumped in there. That's fine.
So,
Offside.
I see Marco as a member of the I'll start again. I see
Italian
Marco.
words. Sorry. Start again. Now we got some outtakes.
I was going to sing the tune at the end there, Guy, but I couldn't remember how it went.
That's the one. Probably
Go on
best
then.
not to.
All together. We're taking a break over Christmas. There'll be an episode from the archives available on the 4th of January, and we'll be back with an all-new episode in 2 months' time on February the 1st. Episode 118 will be available to download from 1:30pm from iTunes, Podcast Addict, YouTube, and everywhere else you'd expect. Until then, stay safe.